Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stefan Spencer, and today I'm very excited to have Shir Ekerling with us. Shir is an experienced entrepreneur and software engineer with a history of establishing and scaling SaaS, software as a service companies as the CEO and CTO. Shir is the co-founder of accessiBe, which offers accessibility solutions for all sorts of CMS platforms, WordPress included. Shir is skilled in entrepreneurship, business strategy, growth and marketing, software development, and UX UI. Shir, it's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
So let's get started by talking about web accessibility as a theory, as an idea. Why should our listener care about it, and what's in it for them?
So web accessibility is probably one of the hottest topics in the last, I think, year or two in web development and web design in general. And the reason for that is because it's crucial. It's a crucial topic. If you consider how many people with disabilities you have, according to CDC, 26% of the population has a disability that hinders their effectiveness of using websites. According to our research, it's more like 15 to 20%, but it's still a huge number. It's at least 1.5 billion people, and that's a huge number, right? So because of that, you basically have so many people that can't access online services and online activities and basically what the internet has to offer from various perspectives. It's not just, buying online, which is the most obvious thing, right? Especially in times like this, in pandemics, when everybody needs to go online and buy everything that they need online, and Amazon and e-commerce is booming. But also in regular times, people that just want to learn online, read tutorials, read blogs, connect with other people, spreading ideas, sharing ideas. All those things are basically what drives the world, our society forward, especially in the last 10 years. Online learning, self-learning basically is the biggest change that our world has seen in the last 10, 20 years because of the internet. Before the internet, we had the library, and that was the only way, or a library or formal education. Now it's changing, and people with disabilities are often left behind. And that's an even bigger problem to society than it is for them, like for the people that can't actually access the internet. And I'm saying this because just imagine what huge impact it will have on society to add 1.5 billion people to that circle of self-learning and self-knowledge and education and collaboration and sharing ideas. That's not just a few hundreds or a few thousands of people. It's a huge number. And many of them are as smart and as driven as you and I. Some more, some less, but you have great people that can contribute to society just as or even more than we can. And I think that's the biggest reason why everybody should care about web accessibility, putting aside the legal responsibility, right? Because there is legislation and there are regulations all around the world, in the United States, in Europe, in a lot of different countries. There are regulations, new regulations, by the way, since 2019 that mandate web accessibility, small businesses, private sector, everybody. But putting that aside, the social aspect of it, I think, is the number one reason why we should prioritize this and put that in the front of our daily discussions.
So what got you interested? Why did you start caring so deeply about this topic that you wanted to start a company to help solve it?
Well, I touched the legislation a little bit, but essentially I'm for a long time in the software industry, in the web development industry for over 10 years now. I wasn't aware of web accessibility. I didn't even think that blind people can use computers, the internet. I mean, they don't have a screen. Everything is designed to be consumed via screen. So it didn't even make sense to me until Israel, where I live in, was one of the first countries to legislate a specific regulation for web accessibility. Started talking about that back in 2015, 2016, and then it delayed a little bit. Eventually, the law came into effect in the beginning of 2018. But I had a software agency before, and my clients basically brought to my attention that there's an upcoming regulation in Israel for web accessibility and asked me to start exploring solutions for them. My clients were usually enterprise companies, big investment houses, banks, so they had to comply with whatever legislation comes out. So that's when I started exploring that world of accessibility, and I was shocked by a lot of the things that I've learned. I've learned that blind people can and do use the internet and computers in general, programmers included, and people with motor impairments can actually or should be able to actually use computers and websites using just the keyboard without touching a mouse even once. That's crazy. People with visual impairments have their own software that helps them navigate and browse websites, and a lot of different things around accessibility that I just wasn't aware of. And when I started getting into that, I learned how important that is from the actual people that are using those websites, people with disabilities, because the entire development process, because I knew nothing about that, was alongside in the beginning and also today, but it differs in the way that it happens. But the entire development process was with people with disabilities, usually more blind users than others, because the vast majority of the requirements and the biggest challenge in making websites accessible, the biggest challenge is to cater to blind people and screen readers. So most of the effort was there. But that's when things just changed for me. When I started collaborating and working with the actual end users, one of them that's one of the biggest changes that I had in my point of view. One of them is a 20-something-year-old programmer, an entrepreneur. He's completely blind, and he's genius. He writes software from scratch. He works for one of the biggest screen readers in the world. He's an entrepreneur. He created some kind of a product that combines computer hardware with a braille device. It's called Braille today. It's now consumer product, with a collaboration with a Russian company. He flies over there a couple of times a month alone. It's crazy to me. A 20-something-year-old doing things that I couldn't do without any disability, in my 20s. And when I saw that, I understood what society really is missing by excluding, not purposefully, but that's what happens, 20% of its population from the internet, from the biggest resource pool the world has ever seen, right? And that's when I started also caring and, not just wanting to solve accessibility for my 5-10 clients, but also doing something that is bigger than that. Actively working and actively participating in society's attempt for inclusion. And that's when accessiBe, or the start of accessiBe, started. Back in the beginning of 2018, we released the first version only in Israel as a POC, as a proof of concept. It was called Nagish Li, which is accessible to me in Hebrew, and that's how things started rolling. But that's basically how I learned what accessibility is and how it can impact the world. And since then, of course, a lot of things change, and a lot of users have shifted my perspective. But that's how I got hooked into that world.
That's awesome. And I presume this is your full-time gig now. You're not also managing clients in an agency still, or are you doing multiple businesses at the same time?
No, I'm 100%, more than 100%, 18 hours a day, only on accessiBe. So we stopped our agency back in mid 2018, so we can focus only on accessiBe.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have disabled folks on your staff?
Yeah, 8 actually. Yeah, we have blind users. Again, that's the biggest challenge in making websites accessible. So usually you will hear me talking about blind users or motor impaired users. Those two are the biggest challenges. But yeah, absolutely. You can't really cater to end users without working with end users. It doesn't work like that. And often you have online courses, and not only online. Now everything is online, right? But accessibility courses and instructors that explain to you how to make websites accessible. But it doesn't really matter how much you learn and how many explanations you get. It doesn't even matter the experience of the instructor if you don't see how real live users use assistive technologies and use websites with their disability and from different types. You never really get to understand how things really work. So I think that you just can't do it any other way. You have to have and work with your end users.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these assistive technologies, screen readers being one of the most prevalent that we would need to revise our website or somehow improve its accessibility for those screen readers. How do these screen readers and other assistive technologies work? Let's say hypothetically a blind user, how can I use a website without using a mouse and with everything being read to me?
So there are several types of assistive technologies. Screen reader is one of them. It's a software that basically does what the name implies. It reads the screen, the content that is displayed on the screen. It's output in two different ways. One is audio, so it's just reading out whatever is on the screen. And the other output is Braille. So we can use Braille devices and just read using the tiny dots, the Braille tiny dots, what is on the screen. It's smarter than just reading what's on the screen. It provides users with a bunch of different options for navigation. So it completely replaces not only the screen, but also the mouse and behaviors and how we usually operate computers. So we have different shortcuts from getting from one place to another place, switching between page landmarks, like the switching between the navigation and then the footer and then to a different region of the page, or browsing websites through their links or through their headings. So blind people grasps websites different than how people that see, because we can look at the screen and we can take a bunch of different sections of it and put them into context. So if we see, for example, a read more button, we also see what's above and below and next to the read more button, so we understand read more about what. But when blind users use websites, they either use it linearly, so they go from an element to an element using the arrow keys. Arrow down will take you to the next element. Arrow up will take you to the previous element using the screen reader. And then you have an element after an element after an element. So if you use that method, you sometimes will be able to understand read more about what, because you've just touched, the title that right after that comes the read more. But usually how blind users use those screen readers, they will navigate using, for example, links. So they will jump from a link to a link. And then they get, for example, if you have 10 read more buttons or links on your website, and a blind user will use your website and they will use it to jump from a link to a link, they will get read more, read more, read more, read more, read more, read more. and they have no idea what that read more means or read more about what. So they just use websites different than how we do. And that's a different way of thinking about that, right? Because UX is we are used to understanding that UX is something that is visual. You have an interface, you have a menu. That menu has elements and drop downs and things, but it's completely different from for blind people. But it's still UX. It's still user experience. It's just a different type of experience that you need to cater to in a different way, but it's still user experience. So assistive technologies, one of them is that it's a screen reader. The other one is a keyboard. Our keyboard can function just like an assistive technology. People with motor impairments, for example, people that don't have their limbs, or even people with Parkinson's that can't, hold a mouse and accurately point on things because their hand may be shaking. So they often use keyboards and only keyboards to operate the entire website. So you need to ensure that your website can be operable by using just the keyboard, that everything can be clicked on using enter, that you can reach every interactive element using the tab key for navigation, tab to go forward, shift tab to go backward. Some of the functionality also need to be accessed by using the arrow keys, for example, drop-down menus that you need to select options from, or switching between radio buttons, radio options using the arrow right and arrow left. A lot of different things and functionality that you need to provide for that assistive technology to work properly. People with motor impairments sometimes even use clicking sticks. That's a stick that they put in their mouth, and they use that stick with their mouth to click on different keys on the keyboard because they just can't do that with their hands, for example. And just think about how that type of experience differs from an experience that you get or I get when we go and enter a website. We can use our mouse to basically pretty much do everything that the website has to offer in a matter of seconds. For a person with a clicking stick in their mouth to go to the About Us link in the footer, it may take 10 minutes to go from an element to an element to an element to an element to an element. And if you have a drop-down menu and if you have a lot of drop-down menus for all your, if you're an e-commerce store and you have a lot of categories and each category has a drop-down or a sub-menu, they will go one by one by one by one by one by one until they get finally to the About page in the footer. You need to provide a way to bypass that. You need to provide a way for them to use your website effectively. So obviously, it won't take them, doesn't matter what you do, it won't take them 2 seconds to reach the footer and click on something like it will take you and I, but you can essentially make your website accessible to them. So it doesn't take them 10 minutes, it takes them 40 seconds or 1 minute. And that's basically how you provide accessibility for people that are using assistive technologies. And that's just two types of assistive technologies. You have a lot of others, for example, Zoom Text, which enables people with visual impairments to browse websites and content and to increase the sizes of the font and the content and change the contrast and a lot of different things and a lot of different assistive technologies. You have assistive technologies that can read web pages, others that can provide meaning for abbreviations and different content that you see on the page and you may not understand. That is the world of accessibility and of assistive technologies. accessiBe, for example, is not an assistive technology that a disabled or a person uses on their personal computer, but it is an assistive technology that a website owner provides their users. So, for example, a user with a degrading eyesight, for example, that may not be able to read your content properly because you don't have a sufficient contrast between the foreground and the background of your text, you can just open the accessibility interface provided by accessiBe and choose the dark mode or the light mode, or choose a different color profile or a different visually profile that fits your needs, and then you can just read the website, everything the website has to offer properly. accessiBe also integrates with screen readers and keyboard users to provide all those adjustments that I just explained automatically, so they can use their assistive technologies properly with your website, because that's your job basically. If you are to be accessible, you need to make sure that your website works with and speaks with those assistive technologies. You don't need to provide the assistive technology per se. You don't need to provide the screen reader. You need to make sure that your website works with the screen readers on the market. And that's also what accessiBe does, in an essence.
So how do you check that this is actually coming to fruition? Do you have some sort of screen reader emulator? Do you need to buy your own screen reader? Do you need to hire a team of like a focus group of blind people to try and navigate your site? Like how do you make sure that you pass the accessibility test?
So first of all our teams have screen readers, 3 different screen readers, 2 screen readers for Windows and 1 screen reader for Mac. For Macs, you have VoiceOver. It's built in the operating system provided by Apple. And for Windows, you have NVDA, which is a free screen reader. You can download it from the internet. It's a community-free screen reader. It's good. And you have JAWS. JAWS is the premium screen reader. I think it costs, $100 a year or $200 a year, something like that. I know that the prices changed since the last time that I bought the subscription. So you have different screen readers, and we use them every single day, all the time. We're basically professional screen reader users. So we are able to test and verify our own work. And also, yes, we have 2 focus groups of blind users. One is in the United States physically, and the other one is physically in Israel. The groups, the users, that test on an ongoing basis hundreds of websites and provide us with feedback, bugs, changes that we need to apply, things that work, things that don't work, recommendations, experience-based feedback, and a lot of things like that, so we can always improve and make sure that we're on top of not only the accessibility requirements, but also the ever-changing web ecosystem. Whenever WordPress updates, something breaks and you need to adapt to something. Whenever Chrome updates and Firefox updates and Microsoft decides to create a new browser, whenever something like that happens, you need to be on top of it. So that's how we basically, focus our attempts and our work with the focus groups. Always testing, always ensuring accessibility is the best that it can be. And again, I'm always focusing on screen readers because it's just the majority of the effort of accessibility.
So let's pretend for a moment that accessiBe as a tool or technology doesn't exist right now, and we're trying to solve this accessibility problem, or we're trying to make our website more accessible, and we don't have very good image alt tags. Maybe we have all the buttons for each section on the homepage has just the words read more, right? Like you were discussing a few minutes ago. How do you go in and change these things so that it's all very accessible and works with screen readers, passes the ADA, Americans with Disability Act requirements or regulations, and all that? Assuming you don't, again, have that accessiBe technology installed on your site.
So you have 2 worlds. You have the world before accessiBe and you have the world after accessiBe. If you have accessiBe on your site, all that you just mentioned will just happen. If you don't have alt tags, you call it tags. It's not, everybody calls it tags, but it's not a tag.
Alt
it's
attributes.
An
Yeah. Alt attributes of image
attribute.
tags. Yes, I can take shortcuts in my language sometimes. Yep.
Yeah. So if you don't have an alt attribute on your image, accessiBe will scan that image, will understand the text. If it's a banner, then you have embedded text within it, for example, 50% off shop now, for example. And you have the objects that comprise the image and the scenery. accessiBe will just, using AI, understand the text and the scenery and the objects and everything, and will provide an accurate alt text for that image. If you don't have accessiBe, you need to do that manually. And you need to do that manually for every single image on your site. And you need to make sure that every time you update your website and you change your content, you also update your not only alt text, but that's just one of the things that you need to make sure that you're on top of. Now, why I'm saying that you have the world before and the world after, because you were able to make your website accessible even before accessiBe. It's just that the work that you would have needed to put into accessibility was just, it's literally crazy. And why I'm saying that because we are seeing today Shopify stores that cost $20 a month or $30 a month, and WordPress website that often, either are free or cost several tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars, just for the template. Or even if you had an agency that worked on it, so it's $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. We see companies in the accessibility space that, because they don't have the technology to make it accessible automatically, they need to do everything manually, and they take a premium for it. And just to audit a website that costs to you $20 or $30 a month, just to audit it for accessibility without even fixing a single thing, costs $2,000 or $3,000, or even more than that, depending on the type of websites. If it's a big e-commerce store, it can even cost $10,000 just the audit. And then to implement the audit suggestions, you will need to go through hoops. One, you don't even use, often you don't even have the source code to change what needs to be changed. In Shopify, you don't have access to the source code. In BigCommerce, you don't have access to the source code. In WordPress, you do, but you can't change WordPress core, right? You can only change what's in your template. And if you hack your template, then whenever the template updates, you lose the changes. Or the plugin, whenever it updates, you lose the changes. So it's not that easy, even if you have source code access. One, you need to provide source code access, which is something that not a lot of people want to do. And the process takes weeks. It can take up to 6, 8, 10 weeks even to make websites accessible and compliant with the ADA and other legislations. So the process before accessiBe is just not a process that 99% of businesses can go through. It's a process that only enterprise companies, several thousands or several tens of thousands of companies can go through, but the 31 million businesses, small businesses and medium businesses in the US just cannot do. And what happens is that before accessiBe, again, we came here to solve that, and we are solving it. What happens is you get a lose-lose situation, because you have, on the one hand, so many businesses and so many websites that people with disabilities can't access, so they file lawsuits. And you then have businesses, small businesses, who just want to provide for their families and are being asked to make their $500 or $2,000 website accessible for $20,000. It's just, they sometimes come to us, with a lawsuit, a demand letter in one hand, asking them for $20,000 compensation, and a proposal from a service company for $30,000 to make the website accessible. They don't know which one is the lawsuit, which one is the fine, and which one is and that's a situation that everybody loses, because if that's what you need to go through to make your website accessible, you will just not do it. You will just hope that you don't get sued, and you won't open your website, and then you lose, because you basically don't have, you're not protected from legislation and lawsuits, and two, you don't open your website to a new customer base, which is a huge potential customer base, 1.5 billion people. Again, their buying force, people with disabilities buying force is in the trillions. So you just that's when you lose as a business, and people with disabilities lose because they can't access your website and the internet is not accessible to them. So you're in a very, very bad situation, not to mention the agencies that build your website. And then, as an agency, you provide your client with a website that gets them sued. I was in that place. I couldn't even imagine the call from my client telling them that he just got a lawsuit for accessibility, because of the website that I provided to them. I can't imagine having that call. So it's a really bad situation to be in. And what accessiBe tries to do is to remedy that situation and to turn that lose-lose to a win-win. Because if accessibility is affordable, then businesses want to make their websites accessible. They want to do that. They want to be able to open their website to a new potential customers. They want to be participating in an inclusive society. They want to do that, but they can't do that if it's not affordable and if the process is completely out of their league, in double quotes. So what we try to do is to make everything affordable, to make accessibility accessible to businesses so that they win. People with disabilities win because they can now use their websites and buy from them or read their blogs and read their tutorials or hire their services or do whatever the website provides, contact them, using their system, whatever it is. And a win for the agencies, because we partner up with agencies and we partner up with website builders. That's basically our business model, partnering up with web agencies and marketing agencies that have clients and have websites that they manage or market or design or create or develop or code. So they provide accessible solutions for their clients, and then everybody wins, and those partners wins as well. So that's how we view the world, right? You can't have just one side that wins. You can't be the accessibility company that takes the premium because they can and charge $20,000 for an accessible website. We can easily take 5 times the price that we take today, easily, because you don't have another solution that can do what our solution does. And it's still way below the service companies, but we don't do that on purpose because we want to open the internet. We want to make sure that the internet is accessible to everybody. We want to make sure that everybody wins from that situation. That's how we operate. That's what we believe in.
So why doesn't WordPress offer in its core the accessibility features that would make it ADA compliant?
So that's a great question. WordPress already has a team of accessibility experts and accessibility advocates that work within its core, but WordPress can provide the platform. WordPress can enable you to make your website accessible as the author of the website. WordPress can't describe your images. WordPress can't describe your read more links. WordPress can provide you with the option to do so. WordPress can't choose the color contrasts for you, or the design for you, or the font sizes for you, or make sure that your drop downs and pop-ups and every plugin in there, hundreds of thousands of plugins, is accessible. They can only provide the platform to do so. Same with all other CMSs, by the way, not just WordPress, even Joomla and Magento and even Shopify and BigCommerce and Wix and all the rest of the web ecosystem. They can provide the infrastructure, and they all, by the way, already provide the infrastructure. You can make websites accessible manually with WordPress and with Joomla and with Shopify and with BigCommerce and with all of them. They all provide you the infrastructure to do so, but it's on you. And you need to know what you're doing. And as I think I've explained, it's really complex. And it's best, having people that understand how and why and the intricacies of the screen readers and the intricacies of all the assistive technologies do the accessibility work for you.
So how does accessiBe do all these things that you just described, that include things like figuring out the context of read more buttons and of image, alt text, and so forth?
That's a great question. So to understand that, you first need to understand what we do, people that don't have disabilities do in order to understand websites. So whenever I enter a website, for example, I will scan it with my eyes. And because I've seen those elements that the website has thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of times before in my life, I know what those things are. For example, I know that the big bar at the top that sticks to the bottom, to the top of the browser window, whenever I scroll down with the text on the left side and the round thing on the right, I know that that's probably a menu because I've seen that thing so many times before. I know that this is a button because it's designed, because it's round and big, and it usually have a different background color. Sometimes it has an icon, and I see a lot of different things on the website that I've seen so many times before, so I understand what they are. And if I don't know something, for example, maybe there's a submenu, a drop-down menu, but there isn't a tiny triangle next to the menu item that indicates that there is a submenu here. But then I can just put my mouse over the menu items, and in a matter of seconds, understand that there's a drop down here with trial and error. But usually it will take me just a few seconds to understand everything the website has to offer to me, right? So the same thinking process is what accessiBe applies when it enters a website and tries to scan and analyze its functionality. Basically, it takes chunks of HTML, of elements, that list and that table and this image and that form and this menu. It takes all those elements with their CSS and styles and website behaviors because it tracks user behavior. This is clickable. This is something that users usually use their mouse to hover on. A lot of different behaviors, and it just processes everything to a database of millions of other such elements and data sets from a lot of other websites to basically understand every single functionality and every single building block of a website, so it has the context of what everything here has to offer. And then once it knows that, again, from design, from HTML builds, from code access, from image recognition and computer vision technologies, from user behavior, once it has all that understanding for every single website in particular, so it's specific to every single website, the process is specific to every single website, then it changes the HTML code on the fly behind the scenes. Nobody sees that, nobody feels that except from people that are using assistive technologies. So it fits their needs or the requirements of those assistive technologies. For example, if the image doesn't have an alt text, when a user with a screen reader, with a JAWS, NVDA, whatever screen reader arrives at the website, accessiBe will bind to that screen reader and automatically provide the descriptions for those images or to read more context and the rest of them. It's even more than that. Often developers and even template providers and plugin providers, then they don't often use valid HTML tags. For example, often you will see developers use A tags like links or spans or even divs, design them in CSS like buttons, and provide them with JavaScript functionality to do something, to open a pop-up, to do something else, open a submenu or something. Those act like buttons, but they're coded as spans, which is not anything. It's just a text string, or a div, which is a division block element, or sometimes even as a link, but it's not a link. It functions like a button, but it's coded as a link. So all those things will completely throw off a screen reader because it will read that thing as a link, or even not read it at all if it's a span without text. For example, if it's just an icon of a shopping cart, it will just completely ignore it, and then you don't even have access to the shopping cart. So for example, let's take the link example. If it's a link, if it's coded as a link, the screen reader will tell you that it's a link. So you expect that if you enter that element, if you click on enter on that element, you will be taken to another page. But no, something will change on the page itself, a pop-up or drop-down, something will happen. And as a blind person, you have no idea what changed. So for all you know, nothing happened, and that link/button doesn't even do anything, but it does. You just don't know that. So all of those things are things that you need to understand if you're to do accessibility manually, and then apply those fixes in the source code yourself, which is exactly what accessiBe does. It just doesn't do that manually. It does that automatically using all those processes that you just explained.
So I don't need to go in and set all these settings and like choose the contrast color and change alt text or anything like that. I just let the technology handle that for me.
So there are a couple of things. There is what happens, and there is what we recommend. What happens is technically, yes, you don't need to touch anything. You can just plug and play, leave it be, and that's it. You will get, if you don't have alt text, you will get alt text. If your color contrasts aren't right, you have all the options for users to change the color contrast so it meets their needs. Absolutely. What we recommend is, we're more than just an accessibility solution provider. We're accessibility advocates. We want as many business owners and as many developers to think about accessibility as they go through their development and design and process of building and using and managing their websites. We want that to be on their mind. We understand their priorities. We understand that marketing and sales and design and UX, and that the 99% of your users need to get a priority rather than accessibility. We understand that. Nobody can change that and doesn't need to be changed. But we want people to be able to think and understand and be aware of the importance of accessibility. So we always encourage, if you can, if you have the option to, if you're aware, to provide your alt text, because you can provide more context than a machine. For example, if you have a picture of yourself on your website, we don't know that it's Stephen Spencer. We know that it's a person, it's a male. We can characterize how you look, but we don't know your name, we don't know your job. So we can provide more context. If you can provide better color contrasts or bigger font sizes, do that. It's also great for regular design and regular UX. So we encourage you to do that. So there's what we recommend and what we believe in, and there's, if you just want to plug and play and forget about all of that and just make your website accessible, then yes, you can just plug and play it.
Do you have some sort of training or online course on accessibility that people can go through and maybe even not have to sign up with your solution? They could just learn about accessibility, since you're an advocate for that, and
absolutely
make the changes themselves, right?
Absolutely. So we have in our blog post, in our blog section of the website, we have a lot of different guides, from accessibility in general to how things work, assistive technologies and things like that, things that we talked about today, and also how to test your website for accessibility, what the requirements are, how to provide better descriptions and tagging and alternative descriptions for your media, a lot of different things, and a lot of different guides. So yes, we have all of that on our blog section and our support section. You don't have to be an accessiBe customer to get to that section. It's publicly available.
Yeah, awesome. And can you do your own audit of your accessibility, or do you need to hire an outside company to do that accessibility audit for you?
So up until 6 months ago, you didn't really have the choice but to, if you wanted to get an accurate audit and an accurate understanding of the state of the accessibility of your website, up until 6 months ago, your only option was to hire somebody and pay sometimes twice what the website itself cost, or even more than that, just for the audit. Today, you don't. Today, we have our own new product called ACE. ACE is a tool that is based on accessiBe's main systems API that is able to test websites live and understand how their accessibility implementations are, if there are mistakes, if it works right, if it's compliant, if it's non-compliant, if it's semi-compliant. It can also tell you how many errors per category you have, how many elements were successful, how many failed, if it's even relevant, if a specific requirement is even relevant to our website. And it's important to understand that ACE provides more than just compliance. It provides experience. It grades your experience and the accessibility experience on your website. So you basically can get a score of semi-compliant, but that doesn't mean that you're fine, because the accessibility experience isn't necessarily very good. It means that you're fine with regulation and you're not that far from achieving compliance. So if you will look at the details of the audit, you will see that there are a lot of different recommendations for providing a better experience on your website. And ACE doesn't cost anything, and in 7 seconds you put your domain, and in 7 seconds you get an entire audit of your page of choosing. You can also get that as a PDF to your email. You can just download it, the audit, very easily. So again, our idea is to make everybody win and to make accessibility accessible.
That's awesome.
And that's a part of it.
Yeah, that's super. I'm going to include a link to ACE in the show notes, of course, for our listeners. Let's talk for a moment about ADA lawsuits. Like, how realistic is it that somebody's going to get targeted for a lawsuit because their site is not passing the ADA requirements?
Unfortunately, it's very realistic. We are seeing an incredible increase in the number of lawsuits. Some of them are actual legit lawsuits by people with disabilities that just want to use, websites and can't. And by the way, 99, maybe 0.9% of the lawsuits are, again, blind people aren't able to access websites with their screen readers. So we're seeing an incredible increase in those lawsuits, a lot because you have lawyers that just found an easy way to make settlements out of the ADA. You often see, you just get a letter out of nowhere that sends you a screenshot of some shady tool that says that you have 500 accessibility issues on your website. Like a 100-page of issues, and they ask you for $15,000, and then you come back and say, well, where did you come from? What do you want from me? And then they settle with you for $5,000. It costs less to settle than to battle that in court. So you just settle, and that's an extortion that we're seeing a lot. Unfortunately, we really hope that to fix that and to change that and to make people want to become accessible, not because of those shady lawyers, but because of actual users that file legit lawsuits, and not because of the lawsuits, but because it's the right thing to do. But the lawsuits, it's there, so you can't really ignore it. It is also a part of the reason to become accessible. The numbers increase. We are seeing, I think we had 11,000 lawsuits in 2019, and it's 100% increase year over year. I think we are almost 300% or even more than 300% increase in the last 2 years or something like that. It's really surging. And we know that 95+% of lawsuits are settled outside court doors. So, realistically, you're easily looking at hundreds of thousands of demand letters. If you have 11,000 lawsuits that actually reach court, you're easily looking at more than 100,000 demand letters. And it keeps on increasing because legislation is not set in stone. ADA, if you open the ADA, it doesn't mention websites anywhere. It's an interpretation of the DOJ and courts of law that websites should be considered as places of public accommodations. Therefore, they need to comply with the ADA. But the ADA itself doesn't tell you what you need to do to become accessible, and there isn't really a regulation. So eventually, you can just send somebody an audit by a shady tool, and you have maybe 300-400 such tools, and you're liable to sue them and to get settlements. And that's not not an easy situation. And especially within the times that we're currently in, coronavirus, you have a boom in e-commerce, in the e-commerce industry today. So you just have a lot more businesses to sue. So the situation is not very bright, but we actively are working on fixing that and making them go away and make those lawyers stop and enabling businesses to comply with accessibility legislation and become accessible for other reasons rather than just being on the safe side of those shady lawyers.
It sounds like almost like extortion, where you might get a demand letter from one organization or lawyer, pay them off the $5,000 or whatever, and then get another extortion letter the following week.
5,000, by the way, it's maybe the lowest of the lowest of settlements. Usually it's 15, 20, $30,000, depending. Of course, it depends on the size of the business, right, and the ability to pay. But 5,000, 4,000, those are the lower threshold. And yeah, you have so many businesses that were sued, not just being sent demand letters, but actually sued several times, 2, 3, 4 times. I think one accessibility provider had a research, and they found that 50% of businesses that were sued were sued more than once. I don't know how accurate that is, but they're a respectable company, so I assume that it's pretty much more or less in the ballpark. And though that's not a good situation to be in. I think that you called it extortion. I don't want to characterize all like that, because you have lawsuits by legit people with disabilities that really wanted to access a website and buy from that website, especially in times like this when it's a necessity, not just something that you want to do. You have to do it. You can't go outside. You often have lockdowns. You can't just go to the store. You have to order online. And if you can't do that, you're in a huge problem. And you can't even have your family and friends helping you out, bringing you something, because they also can't leave their house. So not all of that is extortion, but a lot of that is extortion. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to differentiate. So yeah, it's a problematic situation. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there a website that lists all of the big accessible websites for disabled to be able to access and see, oh, Amazon is compliant and Apple.com is compliant and eBay.com is compliant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so they don't have to go through this clumsy, painful process of figuring out that the site doesn't work for them?
You just described our next product.
Okay. Nice. Okay. When is that launching?
Probably somewhere in 21.
Okay. Awesome. Very good. Okay. So for our listener who's interested in trying out accessiBe, is there a free trial? What's the next step for them? And I do want to say to our listener that I am a user of accessiBe, and I'm a proponent of it. I think it's a great technology, and these guys are doing right by the disabled users. So I'd suggest giving them a try. So where do they go, and how do they start?
Yeah, so every website gets 7-day free trial on our website. It's not per account, it's per website. So even if you're an agency and you have 100 different websites that you manage or for clients, every single one of them get 7 days free trial. You can just go to our website, sign up. You can do that on your own, or you can set up a demo with one of our partner managers or sales representatives, and they will be happy to show you how things work, sign you up as a new partner if you're an agency, show you how to add websites and get your trial, and walk you through the process.
That's awesome. And it's accessiBe, accessiBe.com.
Correct. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Shir. And thank you, listener. So I hope you do something with this information, because there are a lot of people who want to use your site that can't still until you get this solved. This is Stefan Spencer signing off.